An old canine dog refused to leave Gate 6 at JFK Airport, and 12 hours later, authorities discovered a silent radioactive threat hidden in the air system. What started as a routine patrol turned into a race against time, led not by machines but by instinct. This is the true-to-life story of Rex, the retired dog who stood his ground when no one else could. If you're drawn to emotional, grounded stories with real tension and heart, like and subscribe now. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. It started like any other Thursday morning at JFK International. The sun had just begun its slow crawl across the tarmac, glinting off the metal fuselages that lined Terminal 4. Travelers moved through the gates in waves, fathers rolling suitcases one handle while herding kids with the other, business travelers with earbuds like fragile paper promises. Gate 6, assigned for Flight 824 to Chicago, was halfway through boarding when the disruption began. Not with a scream or a suspicious bag, but with the silence that followed a single sharp bark. Rex, the canine, stood motionless at the threshold of Gate 6. Hackle slightly raised, gaze fixed on the glass doors leading down to the jet bridge. He was still but not calm, the kind of stillness that vibrated with restraint. His handler, Officer Dana Ruiz, crouched beside him, her gloved hand hovering just above his harness. "Rex, heel," she said in a firm whisper. But Rex didn't move. The flight crew exchanged glances. The gate agent looked at Dana with growing concern. "Is everything okay?" she asked, clutching her radio like a lifeline. Dana nodded, but her voice betrayed her. "He's alerting to something. I'm going to need a minute." In truth, Dana hadn't expected Rex to alert to anything. He wasn't supposed to even be here. Retired 9 months ago after a decade of active duty, Rex was now mostly used for public education demonstrations and PR events. But 2 hours earlier, the FBI's Regional Threat Analysis Center had received an anonymous tip, vague but credible enough to push a call to the NYPD's Canine Reserve. The words had been simple: radiation threat, JHK, Gate 6, noon. They couldn't afford not to check. The tip wasn't public. As far as everyone else knew, this was just a routine security sweep. But Rex's behavior was anything but routine, and now he was refusing to budge. Passengers, oblivious to the depth of the concern, began shifting uncomfortably in line. One woman, seeing the dog so still, whispered nervously, "Bomb?" Another man, more annoyed than worried, muttered, "You think they'd have this under control by now?" Rex gave another bark, short, clipped, not aggressive. It was his detection signal. Dana's stomach tightened. She tapped her earpiece. "Control, this is K99. We've got an alert at Gate 6. It's not cargo, it's the gate itself. Dog stationary. Doesn't want to move forward." There was a pause before the dispatcher's voice crackled through. "Copy, K99, hold position, backup en route." Rex's alert had triggered a cascade of calls behind the scenes. Within minutes, TSA had frozen boarding. A uniformed officer stepped forward, gently instructing passengers to return to the seating area. The delay was announced over the intercom as a technical issue, but behind the scenes, it was anything but routine. Dana felt the shift. A man in a dark blue suit approached Special Agent Brian Coates, FBI liaison to the Port Authority. She didn't like him. Too polished, too political. But he held authority. "This him?" he asked, jerking his chin toward Rex. "Yes," Dana said. "Retired last year, but I trust him." "You sure this isn't just nerves?" Coates asked. Rex growled low and guttural. Dana didn't flinch. "You see that? That's not nerves. That's certainty." Rex's record spoke for itself. Over 30 confirmed alerts in his career, including 2 that had prevented serious incidents. And yet, what was unnerving now wasn't that he was reacting, but where. There was no luggage, no packages. Just the floor, the walls, the air. Nothing visible. A young officer with a Geiger counter appeared beside them. "Just a precaution," he muttered, powering the handheld device up. "Nothing." The screen read clean. Normal radiation. No spikes. Dana watched Coates read the numbers. "False alarm," he said too quickly, too conveniently. Rex didn't move. The agent sighed. "His not just any dog," she said quietly. "You asked for the best. This is what the best looks like." Passengers were starting to film now. The delay was approaching 20 minutes. Airport PR was already preparing a statement. Someone from media relations muttered something about optics. Dana stared down at Rex. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Rex's ears twitched. Then, with a sudden jolt, he pivoted not toward the gate, but toward the side paneling near a vent along the floor. He barked again, more urgently. The Geiger-tech frowned, crouching. Let me try something. He moved the detector closer to the baseboard. There was a blip. Faint. Barely perceptible. Is that? Gaina began. The tech adjusted the dial. Another blip. Then a third. The air chilled. Coates looked at the scanner. Is that residual? The tech shook his head. No. That's live. Something's down there, small enough to be missed. But it's real. Rex sat. Perfectly still. His alert posture locking into place. At 12:03 p.m., Gate 6 was officially sealed off. The terminal announcement now blamed an HVAC malfunction. Passengers were redirected to another gate. But inside, the questions started flying. What was emitting the radiation? How had it gotten there, and who sent the anonymous tip? One thing was certain. If not for a retired dog with graying fur and failing joints, instead, it became the epicenter of something far more disturbing. The temporary lockdown of Gate 6 cast a strange hush over Terminal 4. What had begun as a mild inconvenience was rapidly evolving into something else. Something unspoken but palpable. Lingering in the air like static. Travelers murmured in confusion, glancing toward the blocked-off corridor, where yellow security tape stretched across the entrance like a warning whispered too late. Rex remained by the side panel near the vent, his body rigid, his eyes locked on something no one else could see. Beside him, Dana stayed crouched, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, feeling the tense vibration running through his muscles. She'd worked with enough K9s to know the difference between unease and certainty. This wasn't unease. This was conviction. Agent Coates had returned to a corner of the concourse where two federal techs in plain clothes were reviewing footage from the last hour of Gate 6 traffic. As the video looped, they flagged nothing alarming, no unattended bags, no strange interactions, no sudden detours. But Dana's focus wasn't on people. It was on the infrastructure itself, specifically the vent. Where does that lead? She asked the Geiger technician who was still hunched beside the wall. He pulled out his phone, tapped into an internal airport schematic and frowned. HVAC system runs into sublevel 2, down toward the cargo tunnels. It's not publicly accessible, but crews go in during maintenance shifts. It feeds into the undercarriage just beneath the cargo hold. That made her pause. So you're telling me this vent connects to the same ductwork that passes beneath the aircraft? The tech nodded. And no, that's not standard. Only a few gates have this layout. Gate 6 is one of them. It's legacy design from when they built this terminal in the 70s. Dana absorbed that silently. Rex hadn't been reacting to any of the passengers nor their luggage. He had walked right past every piece of carry-on without a second glance. His interest, from the beginning, had been on something far less visible, far less obvious. Air. Something in the air. In the meantime, the manifest for Flight 824 was finally handed to Agent Coates, who scanned the names until one caught his eye. Paul Rennick, age 43, Canadian passport, traveling alone, declared profession, freelance journalist, boarding pass 2A business class, but flagged internally just barely on the FBI's secondary watch list. Not for terrorism, but for affiliations. Multiple entries and exits from Eastern Europe, specifically Ukraine, Moldova, and Belarus over the last year. Passport scans confirmed recent arrival at Dulles 4 days ago via Frankfurt, now routing back to Chicago where he claimed to reside. But the reason Coates paused wasn't the travel pattern, it was what wasn't listed. There was no record of his accreditation as a journalist with any known outlet. No tax records, no published articles. Instead, a separate agency note, low-level clearance, capped him as an observer for a UN disarmament task force, specifically within the International Atomic Energy Agency. That detail hadn't shown on the TSA registry because it was classified. But someone in a room with more clearance than Coates had authorized a discreet watch. He's not here by accident, Coates muttered. And if this dog's picking up on something in the air ducts... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he pulled Dana aside. You've got a possible non-civilian passenger. Not a threat necessarily, but someone who's been in direct contact with nuclear materials. That might explain the dog's reaction. Dana shook her head. Firm. Rex has been exposed to that kind of trace scent before. He knows the difference between residual exposure and active emission. He's tracking something moving through air. Coates hesitated. Are you sure it's not just... Dana's voice hardened. If he were reacting to that passenger, he'd have flagged him at first contact, but he didn't. He walked past everyone until he hit this wall. The air around them felt colder now, though the temperature hadn't changed. A shift in tone had settled over the team as subtle indicators began to align into a clearer, more troubling picture. The FBI techs had rechecked the HVAC control board for Gate 6. One noticed something peculiar. An anomaly in airflow data logged at 10:42 a.m., about 90 minutes before boarding. A brief spike in particulate density, recorded for 7 minutes, before normalizing again. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to flag as deviant by environmental systems. We thought it was a false sensor error, the technician admitted. We get them sometimes. But now, it's lining up. Dana motioned for Rex to shift slightly. The dog obeyed instantly, still focused on the same narrow seam in the floor where the baseboard met the wall. He sniffed once, then again, tail straight and unmoving. No sound came from him this time, only the unwavering tension in his shoulders. Dana looked at Coates. I want access to that sublevel. Coates exhaled. That's not protocol. This isn't protocol, she said sharply. That vent connects to a live air channel that passes beneath the aircraft. We've got trace radiation readings, we've got a retired canine who's never once flagged a false positive. Either you give me access, or I'll call it in myself. Coates wavered, then nodded. Fine, you've got 10 minutes. We'll get a crew to open the panel. While they waited, security quietly escorted Paul Rennick to a holding room under the guise of a boarding issue. He came willingly, showed no sign of resistance, though he did ask, with a slight accent, if this was related to the incident. No one answered. In the meantime, a maintenance team arrived with specialized tools, unfastened the side panel by the vent, and pulled it open. A rush of cold air escaped, stale, slightly sweet. Dana recoiled. The technicians scanned the opening. No visible obstruction, just a long shaft. Leads down. Want to drop a camera? Do it, Coates ordered. A flexible optical scope was threaded into the duct. As the tiny lens pushed deeper, the grainy image on the tablet showed the interior. Dust, old wiring, minor corrosion. Then, something caught the light, a faint shimmer. Dana leaned closer. Stop, go back. The tech reversed the feed, froze the frame. Embedded in the wall, barely visible, some kind of adhesive pouch, the color of oxidized metal. About the size of a paperback book. Dana's throat tightened. Is that part of the infrastructure? The tech whispered, not a chance. Collis was already on his radio. We've got a foreign object inside the ducts system, possible hazmat. Scramble bomb squad and radiation containment now. Lock down sublevel access and seal. Rex sat down, gaze still fixed forward, as if he'd known all along, as if he were still waiting for something else to happen. Dana Ruiz stood stiff beside the exposed ventilation shaft, the stale, ion-heavy air brushing past her cheek as the technician slowly retrieved the camera cable. She felt the weight of Rex's presence beside her, loyal, unmoving, unwavering, as the hum of radios around them grew increasingly urgent. FBI agents began to circle tighter. More tactical vests appeared, and the mechanical whir of containment units echoed faintly from the freight elevator nearby. Gate 6 had become a hive of contained alarm. In the middle of it, Coates raised his voice to be heard over the crackle of updates. We've got a possible radioactive device inside a vent system with access to active cargo ducts. This entire quadrant is a hot zone now. I want every civilian moved back to the east corridor. A uniformed Port Authority officer stepped forward with a clipboard and orders from command. His tone was clipped, rehearsed, devoid of context. K-99 Handler Ruiz, your assignment at Gate 6 is concluded. Rex is to be returned to the K-9 transport bay. Handler swap approved by Lieutenant Brecker. Dana's head turned sharply. Say that again? The officer blinked. You're relieved Rex is to be withdrawn per updated protocol. Dana's jaw set. Based on whose assessment? Operational commands. The threat has been identified. A bomb squad and hazmat are en route. K-9 presence no longer required. He's non-active duty and technically not authorized for extended exposure. Her hand clenched tighter around Rex's harness. She didn't need to explain, not yet, that the last time someone had tried to dismiss Rex during a live alert, It had cost them a warehouse full of evidence and a months-long case collapse. But this time, it was more personal. 2 months earlier, she had buried her father, Thomas Ruiz, a former military logistician turned janitor at a private medical research facility. He had spent years working near unsealed isotopes, wiping the same floors where contaminated shipments passed unregulatedly. When the tumors appeared, they spread faster than the VA's response letter. Stage 4 by the time they even acknowledged the exposure. No compensation, no media coverage. No headlines, just a cardboard box of belongings and a death certificate marked probable environmental factors. Dana had sworn she'd never ignore the signs again, never walk away from something that didn't feel finished. And Rex, who had laid silently at her father's bedside for the last 36 hours of his life, had felt the same. "I'm not pulling him out," Dana said flatly. The officer blinked again, surprised. "Ma'am, that's a direct order, so write me up," she replied. "He's already identified a live threat. Until containment verifies it's neutralized, we stay." Coates turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Ruiz, don't be reckless. This isn't a statement on your capabilities, it's about protocol. And optics." That word hung in the air. Optics. It was never about truth. It was about what things looked like to the right people, to the wrong screens. Just then, 30 feet away, a man in a navy hoodie stood behind the tinted glass of a souvenir kiosk, holding his phone angled just enough to capture Dana's stance, Rex's posture, and the caution tape unfurling in the background. He whispered something to someone beside him, then hit record. The screen blinked red. 10 minutes ago they were boarding, he said into the mic. Now they've got a police dog pointing at vents and nobody tells us what's going on. TSA won't answer. Cops just pushed kids out of the gate area. What the hell are they hiding? His companion, a woman with a vlogger ring light clipped to her iPad, added, "I saw that dog growl at a guy. Looked like he was about to attack. Then, they blocked off everything." The man zoomed closer. "This is Gate 6. JFK. Share this. Pelias Terrorism K9 Overreach." He uploaded the video to TikTok. Within 30 minutes, it would cross 10,000 views. By the hour mark, it would become trending content under a hashtag framed around excessive force using animals at U.S. airports. The comments began almost instantly. "Disgusting, that's how they treat innocent travelers now. They're training dogs to do crowd control. Wake up. I don't trust anything with 4 legs and a badge." But others pushed back. "Boots. That's Rex. He saved lives during the Union City gas leak. Retired hero. Trust the dog more than the suit in charge. If he's alerting, you better listen." Dana didn't know yet about the video. She couldn't hear the online war breaking out as Rex sat patiently beside her boot. Eyes narrowed toward the vent as the Geiger technician crept forward again with the new sensor, a higher-grade dosimeter built for surface particle detection. "We've got an uptick," he whispered. "Still low, but climbing, like something's heating." Coates glanced at Dana. "You think he's sensing change in temperature or composition?" "Both," she replied. "He's been trained to respond to progressive decay. He's caught cesium before. This isn't stable. We need to move," the technician said, already backing away. "If this thing ruptures," he turned to the radio. Code blue, containment crew, prepare secondary breach plan. We may have a dispersal risk." At that moment, Rex stood again. No bark this time, just a fixed gaze and a single step forward, toward the vent. Not out of curiosity, but an instinct. Dana caught it instantly. "Wait, he's following something," she said. "What?" Coates asked. Air current shifted. Something just moved inside that shaft. But before he could answer, the technician dropped his tablet. A new image had appeared on the vent cam's feed. Something else, tucked further down than the first pouch. Something smaller, cylindrical, and covered in foil. Dana's pulse quickened. That wasn't part of the infrastructure either. It looked handmade, improvised. And based on Rex's renewed tension, it wasn't inert. The hallway to sublevel 2 was colder than expected, lined with fluorescent tubes that flickered slightly, casting uneven shadows along the damp concrete walls. It was designed for maintenance staff, not law enforcement, and it showed peeling paint, rusted utility boxes, faint graffiti marks where even surveillance had stopped paying attention. As the containment team descended the steel staircase into the underbelly of Terminal 4, Rex halted at the top landing. He didn't growl this time, but his mouth opened slightly, ears pinned back, eyes tracking every movement below. Dana caught it before anyone else. She tugged his leash gently, then crouched beside him, whispering just loud enough for nearby ears to hear. "You mean the dog's reacting again?" Dana nodded, her face tight. "More than before. Get your respirator fully sealed. Now." Marcus hesitated, the kind of half-second delay born from a lifetime of near misses and false alarms. Then Rex let out a short, sharp howl, a noise not trained, not controlled, not protocol. It cut through the stairwell like a blade. Everyone froze. Marcus didn't speak. He just reached up, pulled the respirator hood over his head, sealed the valve, and continued down the final steps. Moments later, he reached the floor, crouched beside the ventilation duct junction, and pulled out a small handheld vacuum probe, the kind used for air sampling in confined industrial spaces. As he approached the lower lip of the duct where it curved downward toward the sub-basement, his body jerked backward. Not violently, but enough for everyone watching to notice. He dropped the sampler. His hand went to his neck, then he stumbled. "He's not okay," Dana said immediately. "Get him out." But the medics were already moving. Marcus had fallen to his knees, disoriented, coughing inside the respirator. They got to him within seconds, dragging him up the stairs while shouting for a gurney and oxygen. When they removed the mask, his face was flushed deep red, eyes watering, breath shallow. Throat irritation, one medic muttered. Possible chemical or particular exposure. "We need full toxicology now. Something's active down there," the other added. "His skin's reacting already. This isn't just environmental dust." Dana's blood ran cold. She turned to the technician still monitoring the air sampler readout. "What are the levels?" He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. Airborne particulates spiked just as he passed that curve. Unstable isotope particles. Low-dose alpha emitters that shouldn't be present in this concentration. "Not here." "Alpha?" Coates echoed. "Those don't travel far." "Exactly," the tech replied. "Which means the source is close. Very close. Could he have touched something?" "He didn't need to. Alpha particles don't penetrate the skin, but if you inhale them..." He trailed off. Everyone knew the rest. Inside the lungs, alpha emitters were deadly, slow, irreversible damage. Invisible. Permanent. The room shifted in energy. This wasn't a drill anymore. It wasn't theoretical. It was happening. A man had just been exposed in a U.S. airport facility, less than 300 feet from active passenger gates. Dana turned toward the ventilation schematics still pinned to the wall. "Where does this specific duct lead?" The technician pointed. "East exit. Vents out along the perimeter wall near the lower level parking structure. We didn't catch it before because it's not inside the terminal proper. So the radiation isn't coming from the plane or a suitcase," Dana said slowly. "It's coming from the infrastructure, or someone used the infrastructure to hide it," the tech replied. "Someone who knew no one would check the old HVAC route." Coates was already on his radio again. "Lock down the entire parking structure. No vehicles in or out. We need level C hazmat and a full sweep team. Repeat, alpha radiation detected in ductwork. Possible source in or near the east lower level." Across the stairwell, Rex began pacing in place. Not panicked, focused. His nose twitched toward the direction of airflow. Dana followed his gaze. The vent ran down toward a maintenance tunnel, then split into a horizontal shaft that vented outside. She glanced at the open panel. "He's tracking again. Whatever it is, it's moving, low and slow." A second technician arrived from the containment truck, rolling a larger device. A boxy radiation monitor with digital spectrum analysis. "They'll give us a signature," he said, kneeling by the base of the vent. He activated the scanner. A moment passed, then the screen lit up. Confirmed alpha emitter. Radionuclide signature suggests Americium-241 industrial grade, not medical. Smoke detectors, Coates guessed. Repursion, the tech said grimly. "You'd need a lot of them, and someone who knows what they're doing." Dana's hands tightened. Americium-241 wasn't rare, but collecting enough of it to register outside a sealed device, and enough to cause symptoms, wasn't something an amateur could do. This wasn't a prank, it was a message. Or worse, a test run. Meanwhile, the medic's radio crackled from upstairs. Marcus is stable, heart rate elevated, symptoms consistent with mild internal exposure. Toxicology confirms unknown particulate inhalation, further analysis pending. That dust was deliberately placed, Dana said. It had to be, this isn't incidental. He wanted it to be found. Just not too soon. They weren't counting on Rex, she replied. At that moment, the second vent camera, recently installed, pinged an alert. Movement. Something had disturbed the dust layer deeper in the duct. A small vibration, then a faint shifting shape. The screen showed a vague cylindrical blur sliding across the vent floor. Dana leaned in, her breath held. Metallic, foil-wrapped, small, not part of the system, not tagged, and most importantly, not alone. The live feed from the second vent camera froze, just as the blurred object shifted again, its metallic reflection catching the low red diode from the duct wall and then vanishing behind a layer of dust-coated wiring. Dana leaned closer, her instincts whispering that this wasn't random placement. It was movement, calculated, deliberate. Someone had inserted a device small enough to travel with the airflow but significant enough to trigger Rex. Register on a dosimeter and send a technician to the ER. A second technician adjusted the lens, trying to re-establish focus. But before the image could resolve, a different voice cut through the radio channel. Operations to control possible irregularity in staff movement log. Request cross-check. The line went silent for a second, then buzzed again with higher urgency. Repeat. 5 custodial and maintenance personnel left their shifts early today without formal sign-out. All cleared the north service gate between 10:25 and 10:40. Dana turned sharply. That's before Rex first signaled. You have names? Working on it now, came the reply. Coates already had his phone out, thumbing through the airport's internal personnel database. 5 early outs, he muttered, unscheduled, at the exact time of environmental anomaly, and no record of equipment transfer, another agent added. They signed nothing out. No tools, no disposal gear. Not even gloves. That didn't make sense. In a post-9/11 facility, every mop handle and fluorescent bulb had to be lofted if it left the floor. But 5 employees had slipped out during a silent window. No alerts, no flags, just a clean departure. One of them stood out. Timothy Crane, age 52, hired 6 months prior through a third-party vendor that provided after-hours sanitization for restricted areas. No priors, nothing on record except a note from a DHS background check. Formerly affiliated with BioSafe Medical Logistics. Terminated 2019. Unsubstantiated allegations regarding breach of containment protocol and material mislabeling. Dana blinked. BioSafe? She asked. That's a private biodisposal firm. Didn't they get hit with that CDC audit a few years ago? Yes, Coates confirmed grimly. Suspected of rerouting clinical waste through standard commercial disposal chains. Lost their federal contracts. The medical waste leak scandal. And this guy worked there until he disappeared for 2 years, then resurfaced at JFK on a custodial rotation. That's not a coincidence. No, Coates said, it's an access plan. The pieces were aligning like teeth on a gear. Crane had credentials to enter sublevels, had keys to HVAC closets, and had time alone between 3 and 5 a.m. when his team serviced the corridors leading directly to Gate 6's service access. Pull the surveillance from the past 48 hours, Dana said. Especially any movement between sublevel 2 and the east vent shaft. But that order prompted another complication. The security chief's voice, nervous and halting, came over the encrypted line. You're reviewing footage now, but there's a gap. One of the DVRs failed. Which one? Coates asked sharply. Camera 42 overseeing the conveyor belt inlet for cargo tunnel. Dana froze. That's the same route leading to the H-base shaft under Gate 6. You have coverage before and after, the voice explained. But between 10:33 and 10:45, 12 minutes, there's no footage. Just static, and the footage resumes exactly when passengers started boarding for Flight 824. 12 minutes, Dana echoed, her voice flat. That's the window logged the particular spike. That's the window. The room grew quiet. One of the newer agents said softly, this isn't just negligence. Coates agreed. It's sabotage. But who could disable a security feed without triggering an alarm? The answer wasn't hard to guess. Crane had clearance not just to the mechanical zones but to the back-end server room for custodial IT systems. Someone needs to find him, Dana said. Now. An alert pinged on a terminal screen. A facial recognition match just tagged Timothy Crane's profile at 8:52 a.m. near the employee cafe. No exit logs after that, no badge pings at departure. Which means he never left, Coates said, jaw clenched. Or someone used his ID to cover a different escape. Meanwhile, in the makeshift operations post inside a cordoned jet bridge, technicians completed a sweep with a high-sensitivity alpha reader. The device began to whine softly, indicating a dispersed trace trail, strongest near the air exhaust duct that led out beneath the parking structure. He used the vent to get it out, the text said. Not in, out. The target wasn't Gate 6, it was distribution. Dana's thoughts spun. So you're telling me this entire setup, Rex's reaction, the particulate haze, the dosimeter readings, it's all just residual, the technician confirmed. Which means the source has already moved through, to wherever that vent exhaust, parking structure, street-level intake, maybe even another gate. Pokes barked toward the hazmat crew. Reconfigure the search. Follow the airflow path, tunnels, grates, exhaust ducts, find where it dumps, find where it could have been retrieved. The implications settled in, like frost. This wasn't just a plant, it was a path-through. A short, higher radioactive payload moved through one of the most densely trafficked facilities on the eastern seaboard. Hidden in the structure itself, bypassing every scanner and except one that wasn't even supposed to be on duty. And all of it lined up with 12 missing minutes. The east lower-level parking structure had been sealed off within 15 minutes of the confirmed alpha particle reading in the vent. TSA officers cordoned off the vehicle zones closest to the intake shafts, while NYPD bomb techs in hazmat suits swept each row with Geiger counters and ionization sensors. Rex remained at the top of the ramp, pacing in place, ears flicking each time a gust of air rose from the duct systems beneath the concrete. Dana had not moved from his side. We're not done, she whispered to him, hand resting gently on his harness. You know it. The technician who had first recorded the alpha spike now returned, dragging a larger spectral analyzer unit behind him. We're going to scan the air vents facing west now. If anything exited that ductwork into this garage, the particles will have left a trace. He paused, checking the calibration on the display, especially if it wasn't sealed right. Meanwhile, another team had begun combing through vehicle logs. It wasn't uncommon for long-term parking to host cars that sat idle for days, even weeks. But a black Chevrolet Suburban flagged attention almost immediately. It had entered through Gate 4B just before dawn 2 days prior. No exit record, no toll payment, no license plate hit on any outbound scanner. It was located now, row C13, parked tightly between a white pickup and a rental van, its windows tinted dark enough to mirror. Whose vehicle is that? Dana asked, walking briskly toward the car as the bomb team approached. Plates registered to Med Global Logistics, one officer replied. They're not an active account. DMV shows their business license expired in 2019. Coates arrived moments later, glancing over the shoulder of the agent holding a clipboard. Med Global, he said, frowning. Wasn't that the outfit that got pulled from UN procurement channels? Yes, another agent confirmed. They used to ship medical equipment to conflict zones, got caught selling refurbished devices as new humanitarian donations. Big scandal in Sudan. Had their vehicle get in here, either they still have active gate credentials from an old contract, or someone's using the shell as cover. The rear hatch of the Suburban was sealed, but the side panel showed signs of forced repair, cheap replacement rivets, mismatched paint. A bomb tech scanned the exterior, then gave the thumbs up. No active radiation outside the cabin. They popped the lock. Inside was a medical transport container, older, cracked at the edges, tagged as Bio-Managing Unit but missing its serial label. The team opened it carefully. What they found was not a bomb, but it was a threat. The device inside looked like a thyroid uptake scanner, 1950S design, retrofitted with modern cabling, the kind of thing you'd only find in a forgotten Eastern European clinic. It reeked of dust, oxidized metal, and antiseptic. The radiation scanner clicked softly. A trace signal blinked on the screen. It's hot, one of the techs muttered. It's not enough to be dangerous at this distance, but it's active. Isotope ID? Dana asked. The tech adjusted the filter. Idle 131. That's nuclear medicine. Either someone was being treated nearby, or this was used to carry the isotope before dispersal. You can't carry I-131 casually, Dana said. It decays fast, leaves a distinct trail. You'd need shielding, permits, tracking, unless you pulled it off a Black Max surplus inventory. Coates glanced at the branding again, or pretended you were donating it. They brought the container out for a deeper scan. Inside, wedged into the foam lining, they found strips of fabric, what appeared to be hospital gown material, wrapped around a hollowed capsule no bigger than a stick of lip balm. It had been stored with packets of powdered iodine salt, likely to mask emissions or confuse initial readings. This was meant to ride unnoticed, the tech explained. Whoever moved it knew how to suppress primary detection but not secondary spread. That's why it started bleeding into the duct system. Meaning, it wasn't designed to explode, Dana said slowly. It was designed to travel. Exactly. It drifted, aerosolized. The HVAC did the rest. Back at the mobile command post, data analysts traced the company registry for Med Global. Their last recorded board member was a dual national, Swiss and Ukrainian, who hadn't filed any taxes in 4 years. Further digging revealed that Med Global had become dormant shortly after a federal audit, but its remaining digital infrastructure, website, email domains, charity listings, had been quietly kept alive by an NGO called International Wellness Fund. The name sounded harmless, but a dive into its paperwork raised immediate red flags. No UN registration, no field offices, donor addresses linked to shell entities in Cyprus and Belize. It's not a health group, Coates said grimly. It's a ghost front, built for transport, Dana added, set up to look like aid but function like cover. They turned their attention back to the SUV. There were no fingerprints on the front seats. The driver's side was wiped clean. The only DNA trace found came from the back compartment, skin cells embedded in the foam under the device. A profile match came back 30 minutes later, male, mid-30s. No name. Just an Interpol tag, person of interest. Suspected in post-Chernobyl isotope theft ring. Rex, still pacing by the stairwell vent, stopped and looked back at Dana, eyes wide, tail stiff. She didn't need words. Something else was coming. The air in the command center had thickened with tension and caffeine, a blend of urgency and exhaustion that settled into every screen glow and clipped radio call. Dana stood over the digital forensic table while analysts continued tracing the connection between the SUV's hidden radioactive payload and the nonprofit shell known as the International Wellness Fund. The data trail kept circling back to one man, Dr. Emil Horvath, born in Kiev, educated in Prague, listed as a medical logistics consultant for humanitarian relief zones, but flagged multiple times by EU regulators for unexplained budget shortfalls in projects tied to nuclear medicine distribution. In 2012, he had worked under the IAEA Jakornio Matersin initiative near the Chernobyl exclusion zone, specifically a contract tied to the decontamination and neutralization of legacy biohazard, which included oversight of outdated equipment used for iodine-based cancer treatments in Belarus and northern Ukraine. Horvath had reportedly signed off on the destruction of nearly 36 portable radiation shields, but no disposal verification ever followed. Within months, 3 of those shields were found in unregistered clinics in eastern Moldova, modified and leaking. When questioned, Horvath claimed the items had been lost in transit. The investigation was buried quietly. No charges, no headlines, just revocation of his eligibility for future contracts. He resurfaced 2 years later as the founder of the International Wellness Fund, posing as a reformer offering grassroots medical outreach, with donations from anonymous donors and ambiguous field departures. Coates stared at the projected profile and said, "He never went away, he just changed clothes." Meanwhile, lab techs at the on-site mobile unit had finished analyzing the particle samples collected from the duct and the contaminated stairwell. Dana stood beside the lead toxicologist as he tapped the microscope monitor. "Here," he said, pointing at a crystalline mesh, nano-formulated iodine, specifically iodine 131, engineered into a dry particulate compound, suspended in silica microstructures, Weaponized, she asked. In the explosive sense, he replied, but if you breathe enough of it, the internal dose is catastrophic. This form was likely developed for targeted delivery, originally designed to treat thyroid tumors via inhalation. In a lab, it's useful, but without containment, he exhaled. It spreads through air ducts like flour. And Rex smelled it, she murmured. Before it hit anyone's detectors, dogs can scent changes in molecular patterns even below what we can measure. That howl wasn't panic, it was recognition. You're saying this isn't just radiation, it's bio-structured, yes, and it's old tech. The kind of design that was shelved years ago for being too unstable. But someone clearly reactivated the method. Dana stepped away, her mind piecing it together. Herbert's background gave him access to obsolete but potent materials. His fake nonprofit gave him a logistics front. And now they had evidence of actual deployment. In a U.S. airport, through a duct system, with the intent not to detonate but to demonstrate. She found Coates again near the satellite link truck, where federal teams were now triangulating Horvat's last known location. If he never left the country, she said, he's still close. And if this was just a message, then he wanted us to find it. Or someone else to see it unfold, Coates added. The cameras, the leak, the dog, maybe even the online footage. He gestured to the viral video still surging across social media. It had become a culture war battleground, some screaming about domestic overreach, others hailing Rex as a four-legged sentinel. But none of them knew the deeper truth. This was never about panic. It was about pressure. Horvat wasn't trying to kill civilians. He was reintroducing an old threat with a new form, disguised in bureaucracy driven by a personal grievance. Dana asked quietly, "Why now?" The analyst beside her replied, "Check this." He tapped a report sent from Interpol's liaison in Warsaw. Horvat's younger brother died last year. Thyroid cancer. Diagnosis delayed because their home country ran out of iodine-131 doses for early screening. The supplier? One of the labs that received contaminated equipment through BioSafe's back channel. The one Horvat used to work with. Dana went still. He built this from grief and guilt, the analyst said. Or revenge. Another tech called over from the isotopic reader. We've got a new trace, same nano-iodine, embedded in a cloth found near the HVAC exhaust grate, street level. No casing, no shielding. It looks like someone manually dropped a dispersal strip, let the duct pull it in. Coates raised an eyebrow. He wanted the particles to travel, but also to be detectable. Just enough to scare without detonating a public health emergency. Dana felt her stomach twist. So, what comes next? Just then, Rex lifted his head and growled. Not toward the vent this time, but toward the entrance to the stairwell. The sound of Rex's growl echoed faintly through the stairwell as Dana stepped toward the threshold, her hand instinctively resting on her sidearm. At first glance, the hallway was empty, but Rex didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the far end of the maintenance corridor, where a narrow maintenance elevator led to the freight level. She signaled two officers to flank the entry as Coates received an alert on his earpiece and swore under his breath. He just got a hit from the flight logistics roster, he said, holding up his tablet. The technical supervisor assigned to Flight 824, name's Neil Parker, born in El Paso, cleared through every background screen, but one alias match just triggered off the NGO registry from 3 years ago, listed as a field technician for International Wellness Fund under a different passport. Dana's pulse quickened. That's our leak? More than that, he's still on site. He's supposed to be loading calibration crates into Cargo Bay C, standard route to Mexico City. Wait, she said. Mexico? Yes. Cargo manifest shows a sealed lead container marked obsolete diagnostic equipment to be dismantled. It's listed under diplomatic clearance from an embassy subcontractor, likely forged. Dana's throat tightened. Isotope material, that's what we think. Likely I-131 or an alpha blend. We think he was planning to smuggle it out under the radar, no public dispersal. Quiet exit. And the timing coincides exactly with the 12-minute surveillance blackout. Parker had access to the camera switches. He was the one who likely masked the movement through cargo tunnel. The operation shifted in a flash. A tactical response team moved to the freight hangar while Rex and Dana trailed behind, cutting through the sub-level access doors. The corridor reeked of oil and old concrete. When they reached the dock, the last container marked for Cargo Bay C was still waiting on the ramp, sealed in a gray casing with red biomedical tags. No handler in sight. But behind the crate, moving quickly toward the side stairs, was a man in a navy blue ground crew jacket with a badge clipped to his belt. "Neil Parker," Coates shouted, weapon drawn. "Hands up." The man froze, but only for a moment. He bolted. Dana gave chase immediately, Rex lunging ahead as they raced through the auxiliary hall. Parker didn't get far. The side corridor turned into a dead end against a chain-link gate. He slowed, panting, then raised both hands. "Don't shoot," he said. "I'm done." He turned slowly as officers closed in. Rex stopped 3 feet away, growling low. Denia stepped forward. "Where's the source material?" "In the crate," Parker said. Voice sharp, double-shielded. "No detonation risk, I swear." Coates arrived, breath short. "You were taking it to Mexico." "Yes," Parker said. "Not for sale, for exposure. For noise." "What the hell does that mean?" Coates snapped. Parker's jaw clenched. "You wouldn't understand. You people never listen unless something burns." Parker's eyes flicked to hers, tired and defiant. "My sister died last year. Lymphoma. The doctors told us she missed her best window for treatment because the real drug was pulled. Flagged counterfeit shipments, blamed delays, but she ended up with fake vials, sugar water. Black market garbage that still made it through customs because nobody double-checked the clinics serving the poor." He paused, voice thickening. "She died thinking the medicine was working. And no one paid for it, no hearings, no press. Just silence." Dana swallowed, her mind catching up. "You joined Horvat?" Parker said quickly. "He told me I could help scare the system. I handled infrastructure. He worked the science. We tested airflow models. No victims. Just particles, just enough to get someone's attention." Coates stepped back, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You poisoned a federal facility. You endangered thousands." "I contained it," Parker argued. "Everything was dosed below active risk. It was symbolic." "Radiation doesn't get to be symbolic," Dana snapped. "It's real. It spreads. People like Marcus, our technician, breathed it. He's in the hospital." Parker's face broke for the first time. "That wasn't supposed to happen," he said, almost whispering. "We miscalculated. The HVAC draw was stronger than the model showed. I told them not to put it in that early." "Them?" Dana pressed. "Horvat wasn't alone?" Parker hesitated. "No, he never is. There's more." But before he could finish, a burst of static came over the comms. Then the voice of an agent, breathless, cut through. "We've got movement at Lot G. Subject possibly sighted at terminal perimeter. Repeat, possible Horvat visual confirmation." The morning after the arrest of Neil Parker and the partial identification of Horvat's escape route, Terminal 4 remained under restricted access, swarmed with media vans, federal vehicles, and a slow-moving current of uniformed officers who no longer moved with urgency, but with the tight exhaustion of those who had just survived something that might have turned catastrophic. In the medical bay repurposed for on-site screenings, Rex lay quietly on a padded cot, a small band of gauze wrapped near his front paw where blood had been drawn for lab analysis. Dana stood beside him, arms crossed, back tense as the attending veterinarian, a radiation response consultant flown in from Quantico, explained the findings. "He's absorbed trace particular exposure," the vet said, "likely through dermal contact, possibly inhalation during extended time near the vent. The dosage is well below acute thresholds, but because of his age and prior service history, we're going to monitor closely." "Long-term damage?" Dana asked, eyes fixed on Rex, who blinked slowly but didn't move from his side. "You organ stress," the vet replied. "No cellular degradation. We're seeing a mild increase in thyroid markers, but it's manageable. He's stable, he stays hydrated, eats normally. Let him rest for now." Dana let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Rex, though visibly tired, raised his snout into her hand. It was a gesture of recognition, of assurance. Like always, she didn't smile, not yet. Not while everything around them still felt suspended. Outside, the FBI had started final reports while DHS initiated multiple lines of inquiry, one of which quietly opened under Dana's name. She had been informed an hour ago by a supervisor, not Coates but someone higher up, that her actions during the Gate 6 lockdown would be reviewed under operational discipline procedures. The language was neutral, almost cold, but its meaning was unmistakable. She had defied a direct command by refusing to withdraw Rex from the field after her reassignment. It didn't matter that her decision had led directly to the discovery of a radiation leak. It didn't matter that Rex had detected what no device had registered in time. What mattered to protocol was that she had made a judgment call without clearance. And now that judgment would be scrutinized in writing, by people who hadn't been there, by people who would never stand beside a dog in a corridor full of invisible threats. Coates had tried to intercept the report. His message to her had been brief, firm, but laced with underlying regret. "You did the right thing, Dana, but there's a process. I'll back you as far as I can." She didn't respond, not yet, but someone else had. The video clip of Rex in front of the vent, motionless and alert, had become more than viral. It had turned symbolic. Someone had clipped the footage with a caption that read, "One dog stood where the system failed," and the comment threads turned into public momentum. Support for Dana surged across social platforms, led by ex-Kenai handlers, veterans, nurses, and families of first responders. They called her brave. They called her loyal. They called her exactly what you'd want at your airport. Within hours, hashtags trended. Justice for Dana, honor Rex. A petition demanding public commendation for Dana and Rex hit 60,000 signatures by noon. Celebrities started sharing it. Congress members commented. News anchors quoted her restraint. And yet, inside the secure hallway outside the medical bay, Dana sat on a cold plastic chair reading a copy of her own internal notice. Words like non-compliance and unauthorized continuation of duty blurred against her focus. But the signature line stood out, a space waiting for her acknowledgement of pending review. She folded the paper in half and tucked it away, not because she was avoiding it, but because she knew what she had seen in Rex's eyes when he froze by the vent. That moment would never be a line item in a report. It wouldn't be diagrammed on PowerPoint slides or explained in procedural rewrites. But it had been real, more real than anything that followed. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was the vet again. "He's asleep now," she said gently. "If you want to sit with him, I'll give you some space." Dana nodded. She stepped inside. The lights were dim. Rex lay curled on his side, his breathing slow but steady. Beside his bed was the harness she had pulled off him the night before, still bearing faint particles of gray dust too fine to be visible. She knelt beside him, brushing the fur near his ear, and whispered, "You did everything right." Her voice cracked slightly. "And I'd do it again." Behind her, a tablet left open on the vet station played a muted news segment. The anchor's lips moved silently, but the chyron read, "Hero dog stops radiation threat, airport under review." Dana didn't turn to watch. She already knew how this story would play in public. But in the silence of the medical bay, it wasn't about headlines. It was about the fact that Rex had stood guard without question, that she had chosen trust over policy, and that now, even as she faced possible suspension, the world outside was choosing to remember that moment for what it truly had been. The morning sunlight slanted through the high windows of Terminal 4, casting long streaks of gold across the polished floors that, for once, were not crowded with passengers but held the quiet hum of ceremony. A temporary podium had been assembled near Gate 6, now shined, cleared, and flanked with new signage draped in navy cloth. Nearby, a crowd had gathered, smaller than one might expect for such a monumental event, but attentive in that rare kind of silence that follows stories too human to be forgotten. In the front row sat a handful of uniformed officers, a few federal agents, and 3 airport custodial workers who had volunteered to clean the sublevels the morning after the lockdown. Behind them stood Dana Ruiz in dress blues, her hair tied back, face solemn but proud. Beside her sat Rex, older now, his posture not as tight as it once was, but his eyes still clear, still alert, still searching for the next signal. Cameras clicked quietly as a representative from the Department of Homeland Security stepped forward and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, members of law enforcement, airport staff, and honored guests, today we gather not just to commence action, but to acknowledge instinct, to recognize loyalty, and to honor the unspoken trust between a handler and a dog." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd, then turned slightly toward Rex. When protocol failed to detect what was silent, when machines offered no warning, it was this canine, already retired once, would sense what none of us did. In doing so, he prevented what our reports now confirmed could have become one of the most dangerous peacetime radiation incidents in domestic history. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood still, as if to honor not a spectacle but a sacrifice made in quiet courage. The DHS official continued, "We don't often name gates. Most are numbered, functional, anonymous. But today, for the first time in the history of JFK International Airport, we designate Gate 6 as Gate R, Rex, in permanent recognition of a canine who reminded us all that duty doesn't retire, and that some heroes never stop standing guard." A slow clap began, hesitant, respectful, and then spread until the small terminal echoed with applause. Rex didn't bark. He didn't move. But he leaned his head slightly toward Dana, brushing her leg. She rested her hand on his collar, not restraining, just anchoring, as she had the day he refused to leave the vent. After the ceremony, reporters clustered around the new sign now unveiled on the wall. Sleek steel letters reading, Gate R, in honor of Rex. Underneath, a simple plaque bore the inscription, "On May 3rd, 2025, this gate was safeguarded not by chance, but by instinct." Rex, a retired canine, detected an invisible threat and stood alone until the world caught up. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Headlines ran bold and clean across morning front pages. "Old dog, new honor. Rex saves thousands at JFK. A nose for justice, canine hero uncovers radiation threat." One dog stood watch and changed everything. Even international press covered the story. A French newspaper ran the headline, "A dog against silence." The narrative had shifted. Where once there had been procedural scrutiny, now there was reverence. Dana was no longer under investigation. The internal review was formally dropped 2 days after the footage of Rex at attention was played during a live Senate oversight hearing. One senator, pausing mid-speech, simply said, "Sometimes breaking protocol saves lives. Sometimes dogs know best." As for Rex, his second retirement was nothing like his first. The first had been quiet, marked only by a change in badge number and an empty kennel. The second came with a press conference, a commemorative collar, and a dedicated unit budget for retired canine care. He would not return to active duty, but he would be present at recruit graduations, airport training seminars, and in stories told to every new handler joining the force. A symbol, a sentinel, a lesson. Dana moved into a new role too. She accepted an offer to teach at the K9 Behavioral Academy, training future handlers not just in obedience and command, but in that deeper, harder-to-teach quality, listening. Your dog, she told her first class, might feel something long before you understand it. Your job isn't to override that. It's to learn to trust it. Rex remained at her side during every session. When asked, she would just say, "He earned the right to see what comes next." At Gate R, the sign stayed polished. No advertisement was allowed to cover it. Passengers would sometimes ask what the R stood for, and attendants would smile as they pointed toward the bronze plaque. Children left hand-drawn cards beside the gate. A small shelf was built beneath the plaque where someone placed a fresh dog biscuit every morning. And sometimes, when the terminal was quiet, officers on night patrol swore they could still hear a faint shuffle of paws. Not in panic, but in watchfulness. In loyalty, in peace. If this story moved you, consider liking and subscribing to see more emotional, true-to-life narratives like this one. What part of Rex's journey struck you the most? And where in the world are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one.